The screams from the cargo bay. Rick sat alone in the cockpit of his small cargo ship, the Sparrow, sipping cheap coffee. Space was quiet tonight. Too quiet. He had just finished a job on Station E9 Delta, a dark and dirty place full of smugglers, traders, and criminals. Before leaving, a rich merchant had paid him to deliver one sealed container. No questions. No scans. Rick had done shady work before, but something about this job didn't sit right. The container was cold, metal, heavy, and locked with 3 codes. As he flew through deep space, Rick leaned back in his chair, and then he heard it, a soft cry. At first he thought it was a sound from the ship, maybe the engine. But then it came again, a low sob, like someone crying inside the walls. Rick froze. He got up slowly and followed the sound. It came from the cargo bay, the container. He placed his hand on it. The metal felt colder than before. Then, thump. A weak knock from inside. His heart beat faster. "What the hell?" he whispered. Rick was not supposed to open it, but he couldn't ignore a living voice. He grabbed his toolkit and worked on the lock. 1 click, then 2, then hiss. The container door opened slightly. Cold steam poured out. Rick stepped back. The smell inside was strange, like flowers and blood. He pulled the door fully open and stopped. Inside the container was a girl. She was curled up, shivering, chains wrapped around her thin arms and ankles. Her skin glowed faintly in the dark, a soft silver blue. She had long silver hair, tangled and dirty. Her eyes, when they slowly opened, were large, violet and full of fear. She wasn't human. She looked like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. Rick stepped closer. "Hey, are you okay?" The girl tried to move, but the chains held her back. She flinched from his voice. "I'm not going to hurt you," Rick said softly. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. "Water." Rick rushed to get a bottle. She drank with shaking hands. Then she looked at him, really looked. Why did you open it?" she asked. "You were crying," Rick said. "You're not cargo. You're a person." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said something that made his blood run cold. "They will kill you too. I'm a princess." Rick blinked. "A what?" "Princess Lariel, of the House of Viralan," she said weakly. "I was taken. They planned to sell me." Rick looked around the bay, like someone might be listening. "You're serious?" She nodded slowly. "They gave you money to deliver me." "I know, but I beg you, don't." Rick sat down on the cold floor near her. He stared at her chains. The metal was strange, glowing with red marks. "I didn't know," he said. "I thought it was cargo. Not a living, not a girl," she said, her voice soft but sharp. He sighed. "Yeah." There was silence between them for a few moments. Then Rick asked, "Are you hurt?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her knees to her chest and started to cry, quietly, trying to hide it. Rick stood up. "I can't let them take you. But I need to know, who's looking for you?" She looked up, eyes wide. "Everyone." Rick shook his head. "Of course." He grabbed a scanner and ran it over her. A red blinking light appeared on the screen. She had a tracker inside her. He cursed under his breath. "They're already following you." Lirihel's hands shook. "Then go. Drop me somewhere. They won't chase you." Rick looked at her. "No, I'm not leaving you." "Why?" she asked. "You're just a human." "I'm just trouble." Rick gave a tired smile. "I've seen a lot of trouble. But this is different. I think helping you might be the first good thing I've done in a long time." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry this time. She nodded slowly. Rick stood and walked to a cabinet, grabbing tools. I'm going to get those chains off. And then, we're getting out of here. Somewhere safe. Lyriel watched him, her voice soft and scared. They'll come for us. Rick looked back and said calmly, let them try. Run before they find us. Boom. The ship shook hard, like something had punched it from the outside. Rick jumped from his seat in the cockpit, heart racing. Sparks flew from a broken screen. Warning lights blinked red. The words on the screen flashed again and again. Incoming signal. Tracking beacon detected. He ran toward the cargo bay. The girl was still sitting on the floor, still chained, but awake now. Her glowing eyes were wide with fear. I told you, she whispered, her voice shaking. They've already found me. Rick didn't waste time. He knelt beside her and started cutting the alien chains. The metal hissed and burned as his tool sliced through it. Lyriel bit her lip, holding back pain. Just a little more, Rick said. Why are you doing this? She asked, trembling. You don't even know me. Rick looked her in the eyes. Because I don't leave people behind, not anymore. With one last spark, the final lock broke. The chains fell to the floor with a loud clang. Lyriel collapsed into his arms, too weak to stand. Suddenly, crack. The ship rocked again. A loud voice came from the speakers. This is Commander Krell. Return the girl or you will be destroyed. Lyriel's breath caught in her throat. That voice. He's one of them. He bought me before I escaped. Rick grabbed her and helped her walk. Then we better make sure he never gets you again. They reached the cockpit. Rick dropped into the pilot's seat and started the engines. Outside the window, a massive black ship hovered like a hungry shark. They're locking weapons, Rick muttered. Can you outrun them? Lyriel asked. Rick cracked a grin. Watch me. The Sparrow jolted forward. The old ship wasn't built for speed, but Rick flew like a madman. He twisted through an asteroid field, dodging lasers that lit up the dark like fireworks. Lyriel watched him in silence, holding the back of his seat with shaking hands. She was breathing hard, not just from fear but from shock. No one had ever risked this much for her. No one. 20 minutes later, Rick managed to lose the black ship behind a moon. He shut off the engine and let the ship drift, hiding in the shadow. Silence. They were safe, for now. Rick looked over his shoulder. You okay? Lyriel nodded slowly. Her face was pale. That voice, Krell. He said I was a gift to his brother. I heard them talking before I escaped the holding cage. They were going to give me as a prize. Rick clenched his fists. Like a trophy. Lyriel's voice was soft. My people, the royal line, our blood is rare. Some species think owning us gives them power. Rick looked at her differently now, not just as a victim, but as someone carrying a burden far bigger than herself. Did they hurt you? He asked quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her eyes said enough. Later, Rick gave her food. She ate like someone who hadn't seen real meals in days. Carefully, slowly, as if every bite might be her last. Rick watched her. You don't talk much, huh? Lyriel looked up. Words have never saved me. He gave a soft laugh. Well, you're not a prisoner anymore. She blinked. Aren't I? I'm still on a ship, still hiding, still weak. Rick leaned forward. There's a difference. You're not locked up now. You're free to choose what happens next. She looked at him for a long time. I don't even know what free means. Rick nodded. Then maybe we find out together. For the first time, she smiled. A small one, but real. Suddenly a sharp beep cut the moment. Rick looked at the scanner, and his face went pale. A new signal. They're not done, he said. What is it? Lyriel asked quickly. Rick's voice dropped. A second tracker. I think it's inside you. Her eyes widened. No, don't worry, he said. We'll figure it out, but we have to land somewhere hidden, somewhere they won't look. She took a breath. There's a place. My father once told me, a dead moon, covered in ice. No one lives there. Rick nodded. Good enough. He set the course. As the ship jumped into light speed, Learyhell sat back and whispered, Thank you, Rick. I don't understand why you helped me, but thank you. Rick didn't answer. He was staring at the stars ahead, because deep down, even he didn't know why he was risking everything for her, but something inside told him. This was only the beginning. The bounty and the betrayal. The stars outside looked peaceful, but inside Rick's mind a war had started. He sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the blinking message on his screen. He had just received a private alert from the black market broadcast network. The words made his blood run cold. 100,000 credits for the return of alien Princess Lyriel, alive or in pieces. Rick slowly looked back at the hallway behind him, where Lyriel was sleeping in the tiny medbay. She didn't know. She had no idea that the entire galaxy now wanted her back, and that he, Rick Velan, an ex-smuggler, could become a rich man by simply turning her in. He leaned forward, turned off the screen, and whispered, Not a chance. But doubt still lingered in his heart. An hour later, Lyriel stepped into the cockpit wrapped in a thin blanket. Her skin still looked pale, and her long silver hair was tied loosely. She sat beside Rick. You didn't sleep, she said. He shook his head. Didn't want to. She looked out the window. Do you ever think about going back to who you were before? Rick stayed quiet. He couldn't tell her what he had just seen. He couldn't tell her that her name was now a target. Instead, he changed the subject. We're almost at the dead moon. You sure no one will find us there? She nodded. The surface is full of metal storms. Ships can't scan through it. It's the only place I ever dreamed of hiding. Rick gave a small smile. Then that's where we're going. But deep in his chest, a storm was building. They landed on the icy moon hours later. The air was thin. Cold wind howled through the broken rocks. Rusted towers stood like graves, old machines from a forgotten war. Inside one of the towers, Rick lit a fire. Lyriel sat close, her hands warming in the glow. She looked peaceful, but Rick felt sick. The longer he stayed near her, the more his guilt grew. Not because of what he might do, but because of what he used to be. Lyriel, he said softly. Can I ask you something? She nodded. Back on your world, did you ever hear the name Tarek Velan? Her body stiffened. That name, yes. My captors said he was a partner. He helped smuggle royal children from my planet. Sold them in secret. Rick closed his eyes. Tarek was my brother. Lyriel said nothing. The only sound was the wind howling outside the tower. After a moment, she whispered, Do you still work with him? Rick shook his head. He's dead, and even if he weren't, I'd never work with him again. Lyriel looked away. So many humans, so many aliens. They treat me like I'm just property, not a person. Rick's voice cracked. You're not. Not to me. Her eyes turned to him. Then why are you shaking? Rick swallowed hard. He didn't know if it was from the cold or the truth sitting heavy on his chest. That night, as Lyriel slept beside the fire, Rick stepped outside. He opened a secure channel on his wristcom. He stared at the number blinking there. An old contact. A voice answered. Low, cold. You have something we want. Rick didn't speak. Deliver the girl. You'll get paid. Simple. Rick looked at the firelight glowing through the broken wall behind him. He could see Lyriel's silhouette, sleeping, small, and finally safe. He turned off the call. No, he said to himself. Not this time. But he wasn't alone. Behind the old tower, eyes were watching. A tiny drone hidden in the rocks had just sent a signal. The next morning, Rick woke to the sound of boots crunching snow. He jumped up, grabbed his blaster, and ran outside. 3 men stood there. Dark armor, guns, slaver symbols on their shoulders. Their tallest one smiled. "Nice to see you again, Rick. We didn't think you'd go soft." Rick aimed. "She's under my protection." "Come on," the man said. "You and your brother did business with us for years. This girl is worth more than your ship, your life, and every credit you've ever seen." Rick stepped forward. "If you take 1 step closer, I'll blow your ship apart." But then, a voice behind him. Soft. Sad. "Rick." He turned. Lyriel was standing at the doorway, her blanket dragging in the snow. She had heard everything. Her eyes, they weren't angry. They were broken. Fight, fire, and flight snow fell in slow silence. But inside Rick's chest, a storm was roaring. He didn't look at Lyriel. He couldn't. She was behind him, still barefoot, still trembling, and she had heard everything. The 3 bounty hunters stood ahead, guns in hand, faces cruel and familiar. Rick raised his weapon. "Turn around, walk away." The tallest bounty hunter, Vex, just laughed. "You always had a soft heart, Rick. That's why your brother called you useless." Rick's fingers tightened around his blaster. Behind him, Lyriel spoke. Her voice was steady now. "Is it true, Rick? Were you one of them?" He didn't turn. He couldn't lie. "I was. Long ago, but not now." Her silence was sharper than any blade. Vex raised his weapon. "Sorry, friend. But she's coming with us. Dead or alive. Doesn't matter to the client." Rick didn't hesitate. He fired first. Boom! The shot hit the ground near Vex's foot, sending up snow and ice. Chaos exploded. Lasers cracked through the cold air. Rick pushed Lyriel back into the tower and shouted, "Run!" She didn't argue. For the first time, she ran not because she was afraid, but because he told her to. Rick dove behind a broken wall. Ice shattered around him as shots rained down. He returned fire, fast and sharp, hitting one of the hunters in the shoulder. The man screamed and dropped, but there were 2 left, and Rick was running out of cover. Inside the tower, Lyriel ran to the engine room. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. Rick needed time, a way out. She saw the old fuel cells, half frozen but still active. And beside them, Rick's emergency signal flares. Her eyes lit with an idea. She grabbed a POI flare, twisted the base, and slid it deep into the frozen fuel. She whispered a prayer in her own tongue. Then she ran. Outside, Rick was down to 1 last charge in his weapon. Vex and the second hunter were closing in. Vex smirked. "Drop it, Rick. You can't win." But Rick didn't drop it. He smiled. "I don't need to win, I just need 10 more seconds." Vex frowned. 10 seconds for what?" Boom! The explosion tore through the tower like thunder. Fire and smoke filled the sky. The shockwave threw all 3 men to the ground. Rick blinked through ash and flame. The tower was half gone, but Lyriel was running toward him, her silver hair flying like a banner in the wind. She knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" He coughed. "Remind me to never make you angry." They didn't wait. Rick grabbed her hand and they ran toward the Sparrow, dodging fire and debris. One of the bounty hunters was still alive, dragging himself forward, but too weak to shoot. Rick hit the ship's button. The ramp dropped open. They jumped inside. "Go!" Rick shouted. The ship roared to life. They blasted off the icy moon as the flames below faded into smoke. In space, silence returned. Rick collapsed into the pilot chair, breathing hard. Lyriel sat across from him, covered in dust and blood. They looked at each other. "You saved my life," Rick said. She didn't smile. "You saved mine first." There was a long pause. Then she added softer, Even if you were once part of them, you're not anymore. Rick looked down. I didn't deserve your trust. Lyriel shook her head. Maybe not, but I gave it anyway. He looked at her now. Not as cargo, not as a bounty, but as a person. Strong, brave, real. She wasn't just royalty. She was fire in human form. Suddenly the ship's warning alarm beeped. Another signal. Another danger. Rick cursed. More hunters. We can't stay in this part of space. Lyriel walked over and placed her hand on his. I know somewhere we can go. He looked up. Where? She whispered. A place they fear. A place where only my kind survives. Rick narrowed his eyes. Is it safe? She smiled now, for the first time truly. Only if I'm with you. Rick nodded. Then lead the way, princess. She shook her head gently. Just call me Lyriel. The man. She can't hate. The stars outside the window looked still, peaceful. But inside the ship, Lyriel was crying. She sat in the corner of the engine room, hidden behind crates. Her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Silent tears ran down her silver-blue cheeks, disappearing into the folds of the blanket Rick had given her. She wasn't crying from fear anymore. She was crying because of him. Rick, the man who once walked in the same darkness that broke her world. A man who now fought against that same darkness to protect her. How could she hate someone who had every reason to be her enemy, but chose not to be? Rick sat in the cockpit, hands resting on cold metal controls. But he wasn't flying now. The ship was in drift mode, silent and cloaked, hiding inside a nebula. He hadn't seen Lyriel since they escaped the burning moon. She had gone quiet, distant, and he understood why. He couldn't erase his past, but he could try to build something better. He finally stood, walked to the engine room, and found her there, small, glowing softly in the shadows. She didn't look up. I didn't know if I should come, Rick said quietly. But silence hurts more than shouting. She stayed silent. He walked closer, sat on the floor across from her. I was raised by bad men, he said. Not monsters, but close enough. They taught me to trade, lie, smuggle, and look away from pain. I got used to it. Her voice broke the silence. And then, Rick looked at her. Then I saw a girl locked in a box and I couldn't look away anymore. Lyriel finally raised her eyes. They were red, tired, but clear. You're not like them. Not anymore. He nodded. But I still help them. That won't ever go away. She studied his face. You fight like someone who's angry, but protect like someone who's lost something. Rick's chest tightened. I lost my brother. I lost my faith. And now? He paused. Lyriel leaned forward. And now? Rick didn't finish. He couldn't. But she smiled. A real one. Not soft or shy, but full of quiet understanding. You haven't lost me, she whispered. Later, Lyriel brought out an old hologram crystal from her cloak. She placed it in Rick's hand. What is it? He asked. My home, she said. Before it was taken, he activated it. A 3D image glowed to life between them. A bright city floating in the clouds with white towers, glowing rivers, and winged creatures flying between crystal bridges. Music played faintly in the air. Rick's mouth parted. It's beautiful. She nodded. It's gone now. But I keep this to remember who I am. She looked at him. Do you have anything from your past? Rick thought, then stood and walked to a locker. He pulled out a worn leather pouch and handed it to her. Inside was an old photo. 2 boys. One laughing, one serious. Both covered in grease. Tarek and me, Rick said, before the galaxy swallowed us. Lyriel touched the photo gently. You were just boys. Yeah, Rick said. We grew up wrong. but only one of us stayed that way. A new sound broke their moment, a soft pulse from the ship's console, a message, encrypted, unmarked. Rick walked quickly to the screen and opened it. Words appeared. "We know where you are. Return the girl, or we'll burn every planet you land on." He cursed. "They traced us, through the nebula." Lyriel stood. "Then we have no time left." Rick looked at her. "Where do we go?" She hesitated, then answered, "To the hidden edge, to my mother's secret refuge, if it still exists. It's the only place left." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Your mother?" She nodded. "Queen Varela. She died in the war, but before she fell, she left a place for survivors." Rick looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're not just a princess. You're the last of a royal bloodline," Lyriel nodded. "And now I choose who I trust. And I trust you, Rick." Rick set the ship's course. As the stars shifted around them, Lyriel stood beside him. Close now. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was warm. Rick looked at her and said, "You could have hated me." She replied softly, "I did. For 1 minute. And now?" She smiled. "Now? I can't. I won't let them take you," the dream came again. Lyriel stood in a long white hall surrounded by voices she couldn't see. "She failed us. She ran. She let herself be taken. Her crown slipped from her head. Her people turned away. Even her mother's face faded, like smoke. And then, one voice remained. I won't let them take you." She turned and saw Rick standing in fire, his arms open, and then she woke up. The engine hum filled the silence as the ship floated near a red dwarf star. Rick stood at the control panel, arms crossed. He hadn't slept. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You okay?" Lyriel gave a small nod. "Bad dream." Rick tried to smile, better than real life. She walked closer. "We're almost there?" He nodded. 2 hours to the edge of the star zone. Your mother's refuge. If it's real, we'll find it." She placed a hand on the glass. "It was built for war, and for people with nowhere else to go. I just hope it's still breathing." Rick said nothing, but his jaw was tight. His fingers tapped the metal edge. "Rick," she asked quietly, "why haven't you looked me in the eyes since we left?" "The nebula?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because I heard the voice." Her heart sank. "The message?" He nodded. "The one that said they'd burn planets for you. For us." Lyriel whispered, "You don't have to protect me. I've brought danger to you." Rick looked at her then, eyes tired, jaw set. "I protect you," he said, "because I want to, not because I have to." But at that moment, the ship's console screamed, "Alert! Enemy lock detected." Rick jumped into the pilot seat. "They found us again? That fast?" Lyriel stared at the radar. 3 red dots, closing in. A voice came through the speaker, smooth, cruel, familiar. "Rick Valen, you stole royal property. Return her and you may live." Rick stood slowly. "It's him," he said. "Vex's boss." Lyriel's eyes narrowed. "His real name is Maltrax. He was the first to offer gold for my capture, the one who broke our treaties and laughed as my people died." The voice came again. "We are boarding now. Resistance will be your last mistake." Rick turned to Lyriel. "We don't have weapons strong enough. They'll breach the hull in minutes." She grabbed his arm. "Then we don't wait." They ran to the lower deck. Rick opened a small weapons locker and threw her a shock blade. He took a pulse rifle and a thermal charge. "I've got a plan," he said, breathing fast. "But you're not gonna like it." Lyriel raised an eyebrow. "You think I still believe in comfort?" Rick smiled grimly. "Fair. 5 minutes. Later, the enemy ship docked. The door hissed open. 3 armored figures stepped inside, faces hidden behind black masks. The ship was quiet. Too quiet. "Clear it," one of them said. They moved fast, left, right, center. But then, bang! The hallway door sealed shut behind them, and Rick's voice echoed through the speaker. "Wrong ship, wrong plan. Welcome to your grave." He pressed the detonator. The hallway exploded in flames. Lyriel watched from a corner, covering her face as heat rushed past. One of the enemies flew across the wall. 2 more fell, screaming. Rick ran forward, blaster in hand, shot the last one clean in the chest, then silence again. Smoke filled the hallway. Lyriel stepped over the wreckage. "You risked blowing up the ship?" Rick turned to her, eyes burning. "I risked it because you're worth more than all of this metal." Suddenly, a slow clap echoed from the speaker. A new voice. Calm. Deep. "Very good, Rick, but I'm not on that ship. I'm in orbit. Watching." Rick's hands curled into fists. Coward. Real power doesn't walk, it watches. Now listen. Give her to me, or I rain fire on every system you land in. You can't run forever. Rick looked at Lyriel. She stood still. No fear, just fire in her eyes. "I know what to do," she said. "What?" She walked over, pressed her palm against the security console, and activated a strange energy field. A deep hum filled the room. "Royal signal," she explained. "It calls for one final defense." Rick looked confused. "What kind of defense?" She turned to him slowly. "One that erases everything, unless someone I trust tells it to stop." He stepped closer. "You trust me that much?" She placed her hands on his chest. "I don't just trust you." She leaned in. "I believe in you." A princess, and her human. The ship was quiet again. But not because the danger was over, because everything was waiting. Waiting for Rick. Waiting for him to speak the words that would either stop the ship's self-destruction or let it all burn. The royal energy field hummed like a heartbeat. Lights flashed in a slow, growing rhythm. Red. Lyriel stood beside him. Calm. Steady. "If you say nothing," she whispered. "The system will wipe my tracker, erase my trail, and destroy this ship. No one will ever find us." Rick looked at the screen. "And if I stop it?" "You make a choice," she said, "to protect me or to run again." Outside, the enemy ship floated just beyond sensor range. Maltrax, the slaver lord, was watching, waiting too. He thought he had them cornered, but he didn't know Lyriel had just handed control of her life to a human man who once smuggled cargo for gold, a man she now trusted more than anyone in the galaxy. Rick stepped back from the console. His hands trembled. "I'm no king," he said. "No hero. I'm just a man who's made too many wrong turns." Lyriel walked up to him, took his hand. "And I'm a princess who was treated like property. But I'm still here, and I still choose." Rick looked into her eyes. "Even after everything I told you? Everything I did?" She smiled gently. "You didn't sell me. You didn't betray me. You fought for me." He looked down. "I don't know what I am anymore." "You're mine," she said softly. "If you want to be." The lights flashed faster now, 30 seconds. Rick turned back to the console. He raised his hand, then stopped. He looked at her. "Tell me again," he said. Lyriel stepped closer. "You are not your past. You are the man who gave me a name, not a price." Rick pressed the control. The lights stopped flashing. The ship did not explode. The signal shut down, and the enemy above lost their lock. Back on the slaver ship, Maltrax slammed his fist into the console. "No, she's vanished from the system." His officer turned pale. "She activated a full royal purge. Only a direct bloodline code could have done that." Maltrax growled. "Then she's not just alive. She's awakened." On Rick's ship, the silence was replaced by a soft hum, peaceful, safe. Rick exhaled. It's done. Leary Hell looked around the ship. This old thing, it's saved us more than once. Rick chuckled. Yeah, it's got more heart than most kings I've met. She turned to him. What now? Rick shrugged. We could disappear. Hide somewhere cold, dark, and quiet. She smiled. I've had enough of cold and dark. He smiled back. Then where do you want to go, princess? She took his hand. Anywhere, as long as I'm not going alone. Later, as the ship floated near a quiet green world, Lyriel placed something on the control panel. It was her royal crest, the symbol of her people. She looked at Rick. I don't need this anymore, she said. It belonged to a girl in chains. I'm not her now. Rick picked it up and turned it over in his hand. You're still a princess. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Maybe. But if I am, then you're the one I kneel to. Rick blushed. Please don't kneel. She laughed. It was the first time he had ever heard her laugh, and it sounded like wind and light. They stepped off the ship together, onto the green world below, not to run, not to hide, but to begin. No bounty hunters, no cages, no burning stars. Just a woman with silver hair and violet eyes. And the human who refused to let her be sold. She was a princess. But to him, she was more. And to her, he was never just a rescuer. He was her choice, her freedom, her forever. The end.